Today's episode is presented by Lodestar, the fee experts.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Lodestar's Lending Leaders. Our guest today is Babar Chaudhary, founder of MortgageAutomation.com, good friend, longtime friend in the industry. And I think, Babar, you set the record for the most times both of us had to reschedule to do this podcast.
Oh, it was reciprocal, Jim. It was completely reciprocal.
Travel and parents and sick kids and all of that. It was.
Yeah. This is going to be the greatest podcast I think that this.
We'll see. We are loose, so we are ready to go. So I appreciate your time. Excited about some of the things we're going to talk about today as well. So to start, what got you into the mortgage technology space?
Well, initially when I got into mortgages in the early 2000s, and at the time, the process was very, very manually driven. You know, everything was very paper driven. Everything was very, so there was a lot of ways that you could use technology to, to expedite, to make things more efficient, to make things more accurate, and to prevent more cures. And so I just started investing time and effort into mortgage tech. And in fact, when I got out of school, when I got my computer science degree, the first thing I did is I worked for a mortgage company. And so and I was just like this little junior programmer working on Excel, but I used to code at home. Like I was like a straight up programmer. But I guess just, they were just like, hey, we just need you to make some Excel macros. And I was like, okay. Eventually they decided to go with a proper LOS, and I took the time to learn the LOS, learn how the operations worked, and I was fascinated by it, really, to be honest with you.
Yes. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of that early 2000s technology has not changed in 20 years.
It hasn't. The funny thing is, we're about to talk about automation, and that keyword is dropped everywhere. Like everybody says that the automation, and automation is this is the way I look at automation. Automation means that if you left the office and turn off the lights, everything would be working as is, like nothing would break. Yeah. That is true automation. And that's what I strive to reach. And so that's part of the reason why I thought mortgage was a great space to get into, because it's so right for it, but
there's so many very manual processes too. I think the address gets entered 70 times in a transaction from application to close.
And it's cyclical. It's like the stuff, the double entry stuff, but it's completely acceptable. It's completely acceptable.
It's the way it is.
Yes, it's like going to a morgue and talking to one of the morticians, and they completely think death is a completely part of life. You talk about it, we're like, oh my God, we just had a terrible day. Our friend or friend's friend or something like that. So I think that's what's happened in our industry.
Normalized too.
It's just normalized. It's completely normal. It's okay to do something 100 times over and again. Yeah.
Well, great segue, because I'm sure companies come to you to find all the skeletons in their closets. So.
Oh yeah. There's quite a few skeletons. But automation there's a couple ways that automations. There's so many applicable ways to do it. Like so, the way I do it specifically, if we're segueing into automation, because I did that quite soon. I'm sorry.
No worries.
But the thing is that I found that using APIs for automation is the preferred method, but unfortunately, not everything is exposed via APIs. I'm sure there's things in Lodestar that you have in your native product that is separate from your APIs, because it's two separate paths.
We've done it there. We've put in a lot of investment into our API and getting that to match. But to be honest, the demand's not always there. I always joke most clients can't spell API. Never mind know what it is and does, right? Because unless someone hires someone like you or an outside company, you need an internal programmer to do that and integrate that. And an API is basically a way of using an application without being in it, right? So it's a way of automating, because it's doing stuff behind the scenes, right? Or lights out.
So there's the gap, so the gap between in mortgages is that APIs aren't built out enough. So how do you do automated tasks? You have to simulate what a human being does, and that's where robotic process automation comes in, RPAs. And so I've designed my own platform that tightly integrates with mortgage loan origination systems, and then it's able to do tasks that a human being can do. So it could simulate like property. It could go to USPS, check the property, and if it ever changes, it could spit back and let you know if the property address is, and it could fill it out.
It's replacing the button. It's automating the button clicking.
Exactly. Or let's say you want to go a little more complicated. Let's say you want to automate disclosures. Let's say you want to do things like get your tax tables. Let's say you want to integrate Lodestar. Let's say you want to do Lodestar without pressing a button, and you want to do it all like A to B, and you want to do your disclosures, get your fees, get everything lined up, and not have anybody touching it. I mean, RPAs is it's a good solution. It's a proven solution. It's been on the industry for a while, and it's made some headway in efficiencies. So I feel like
and I think that's a good thing to bring up, right? RPA, that's one of the acronyms that come up. Is it BPO or BPA is another one?
Yeah, BPA is another one. Yeah.
So, what's the difference? What's RPA versus BPA? Business process automation, right?
Yeah. So business process automation is well, an RPA is the robotic process. The business process is where you're actually engineering the processes, right? So, but most people that do BPAs re-engineer the way they do business. Because listen, if you're actually going from person A to point B, getting point B to check it, then getting point C to check it, and then bring it back to point A, you could re-engineer that entire process, and you could streamline your process. And so I think that's where BPA comes in very handy. Like you could actually streamline the way you do business. So it not only affects your tech, it affects the way you do business. So,
and I think that's an important point too, because you can, automate a crappy process, and okay, you're speeding that up a little bit, but if you actually change the process and streamline it that way, like
change the entire process. Exactly.
And one of the questions I wanted to ask about this too, because when I was at a conference recently at the Big Encompass show, and usually I always like to ask people, what are you interested in? And someone will be like, we want to get into e-closings, or we need a new CRM. But to the person this year, they said automation. We need to automate everything we can, right? And like, I'm sure that means different things to different people. But the question I was curious to ask you is, what shouldn't be automated? Like, what things aren't you going to be automating when you're looking at an operation?
Okay, so I don't believe that we are at a point in tech that we could go completely silent automation. This is just not possible. So there has to be some hybrid formula. I'll give you an example. So we're coming out with this new product that does bank statement, that does income calculations. Okay. So in order to income calculate, you got to look at pay stubs, you got to look at W-2s, you got to look at bank statements maybe. And what you can do is you could surmise what is a proper deposit, what's an NSF, what's non-sufficient funds, what is their actual income. But some of that stuff, it requires a human being to understand how it's going to work, right? So you see an anomaly of a deposit for $10,000 that happens once every 6 months. Is that really income? And can a computer figure that out? That is a great example of something that can't be automated, because it just requires somebody, an underwriter, somebody with previous knowledge to be able to do that. And am I saying that's never going to happen? But today, right now, at this point, it's not there. But
isn't there a difference from having a human look at that entire process, or automating 70%, 80%? Right?
Exactly.
Some element of it. Like,
exactly.
It's not all or nothing, to your point.
Yeah, exactly. It's a hybrid process. Right now, what you want to do is you want to cut down on the corners and make everything a soft corner, and then make the process as simple as possible for the human being that's involved. So automate up to a point, and then pass it up to a human being, and then go from there.
Then I feel like the extension of automation that is getting a lot of publicity now, throughout tech, is AI, right? GPT, right? We even our CTO went to ChatGPT and put in, what's the transfer taxes for Montgomery County, Maryland, for this home? And they spit out a detailed breakdown and answer. It was wrong, but it was still pretty scary to see. So I feel like it's another term that's really misused in my mind. But what is in your mind when people come to you and say, we want AI, we want to be the AI underwriter? Like, what does that ultimately look like? Like, what is the extension of automation? Like, do you see a place for that in the industry?
So of course. And I think the most, because central to a loan origination system is documents.
Yeah.
So if you were to use, so there's different ways that people use artificial intelligence. In this specific manner, I think one of the most important factors in mortgage is going to be computer vision. Computer vision allows artificial intelligence to look at a document and process information like a human being. So
it's not like OCR. I'm not familiar with the concept of computer.
Yeah, it's not OCR. OCR only does coordinates. Like, it would allow you to expects this and this place.
So OCR, optical character recognition, you basically scan stuff and convert it to text, right?
Exactly.
So then what's computer vision? How's that different? I haven't heard that.
Computer vision can infer based on text around, what the actual so if you put in driver's license, if you ever looked at driver's license from different states, perfect example, it's all in different spots. It's upright, maybe it's left. It's just different. But if you use OCR, you would have to do all 50 states. You would have to have a process for every 50 state, a template. But if you use computer vision can surmise what the actual text is going to be, regardless of the location, or regardless if there's ancillary text that's making the text illegible, part of it illegible. So it can infer things based on words, by positioning, by numbers. And the way you do that is by training the AI. You train it with computer vision. You just spit in, spit out a bunch of driver's license, and before you know it, it knows exactly what it's doing.
So they know a date of birth should be here in this format.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. It will know, and you don't have to do all 50 states. You do like 12, and it'll be able to make the assumptions of what the actual data is supposed to be inferred as. And that's where computer vision is, I think, the most important part of mortgage is going to be, because I don't think OCR, as you know, it's not a process that's replicable, because then you have to have libraries.
OCR, I mean, and honestly, OCR seems like a part of computer vision, because they have to get the text right. They have to get the text in, but now you're adding a layer of, and it seems like machine learning is kind of wrapped up in that too, of you actually training a system based off the data.
You are right.
But
you're right. Yeah. But computer vision to me is where the next step is, and that means that you could read documents. That means you could take a document and input the data directly into the app. That means you could make decisions based on documents, because all our entire industry is based on documents.
Well, you look at verification of income, right? Yeah. And what you're talking about, it's all taking documents, taking pay stubs, putting that together, and getting kind of a good idea what it is. And then you have people double check that, and if this starts to map 95, 99% of the time, great, let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think the problem is, I was in an industry before this, legal review, where they were basically automating having an attorney go and review documents to see what's important and what's not. And one of the problems is, to have it be of any benefit, you needed that training set, you needed like 100,000 documents. You needed a lot of documents to have that statistically significant and confident thing. So like if someone's doing either a vendor has to come in and do this, or a very large company, how accessible is really this type of technology?
I would say it's getting very accessible, because what's happening is that people have trained document centers as third parties. For example, driver's license. You could, or not driver's license, pay stubs. Pay stubs could be anyway. But there's companies out there that can take any pay stub and pull the information out of it, because they have trained the document, so you don't have to put the legwork in doing the 100,000. Yeah, of course, you have to. Everybody has to eat, and so But I feel like that's the best model. That's the most rapid application development model you can use, in my opinion. So, but training every document, that would be brutal. So So that's kind of where I think, but that's a very good point. You're right, because sometimes training a document can become, the solution can be worse than the problem. And I think that's one of those where,
when you have these conversations, are there certain type of companies that are looking at this? Like, I find the more sophisticated companies and mortgage companies I deal with are basically having a team in-house and doing everything they can with APIs, right? They are basically trying to completely circumvent having to use kind of out-of-the-box software.
Yeah, and it's very true. But the problem with that is that we are in a cyclical industry. So if you're not a revenue generating individual, what happens when stuff's happening right now?
What's our R&D budget worth when
and you're building this utopia society? We're supposed to be in Zion or something, and then on month 6 we run out of funding, because we are cyclical. It's never gonna. And for some reason, everybody seems to think it's always going to last forever, and now everybody thinks it's never going to get better. So like it's always the sun's going to come out, but it's going to rain sometimes too. So I don't agree with that theory, because the first thing happens is tech gets cut. Some people, like the non-revenue generating places, get cut. That's just the way it works. And I don't think that model works very well. I think there's a hybrid for everything, though. I don't think you can go one way or the other. I think life is balanced.
Well, the idea of a hybrid of, like, yes, you need your in-house technical resources, but hiring developers is really that best use of time, right? For a product
exactly.
can help you internally, but not necessarily be revenue generating versus the box software that you can get at a much cheaper rate.
I think that, and I think a lot of people, it becomes almost like a bureaucratic, like political thing almost in certain companies. So navigating that is probably not my strong suit, if you can't tell by now. But I will tell you that. If I had a company like Lodestar, for instance, and I said, "Hey, I'm just going to gather all the taxes from everywhere and do it myself," I would have I would be out of my mind. Like that would be like not the like you have to.
It depends. It works. Honestly, it works for some people. If you're only in Orange County, California, do it.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Okay. Yeah, if you're only in Orange County, California,
if you're Quicken, do it. Right? Like there's certain people where it does make sense, and certain people where it doesn't. And I think that's to your point about balance and what works for everyone's organization, that's I think that's an excellent point, because like there's people that I will say like, no, you should not be implementing our software. And quite frankly, probably people that don't need to automate processes. If you're doing something once a month, twice a month, and it takes you 10 minutes, no, it doesn't matter, right? If you're doing
I completely agree.
Daily, it's different. So I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier of like understanding the process, right? Understanding where that choke point is, where that pain point is, and from there. And I think one thing that comes up a lot with automation too is people feel like it's replacing jobs, right?
Yeah.
And how do you fight that concern, especially when I think some of the decision makers or some of the people who you're talking to are those jobs, right? Like I've had. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, brother. Go ahead.
So I was pitching our solution to someone who was the person accumulating the data. He's the person who goes ahead and updates data on the 3 states where this lender worked, and he keeps everything up to date in the system. So for him, that's job security. He wasn't about to spend money to bring it in. And that we didn't get that sale because that was the person who was making the decision.
You're not the decision maker.
Talk to someone else, or who knows what happened now. But so how do you fight that, and how do you see that materialize on you?
It's almost like that's like a rhetorical question almost, because the thing is that it's hard to do. But I found the one argument that sometimes works, but not all the time, because obviously human beings are irrational creatures. So but if I was to say that you could repurpose and work on things that you actually care about, instead of doing a mundane task over and over again, wouldn't you rather do that? Would you rather find ways that you could generate revenue for your company, and you could and then do something that you actually love, instead of, I know nobody in this world wants to download documents, upload them to the investor, or go to investor, download purchase advices, put that information in. Nobody wants to do that. Like,
I mean, it could. You're playing music in the background. It's mindless. It's job security. That's great. I'm listening to a podcast. It's fine, right?
Yeah, like, I hear what you're saying.
There's a quote I posted a while ago on LinkedIn. It's from the comedian George Carlin. Most people work just hard enough to not get fired and make just enough money to not quit.
Yeah.
Right? And like, it doesn't apply to everyone. There's people it does, and that's fine. But I think it's understanding that, right? So like, I agree. That's part of the problem of, but at a manager level, like if you have a loan officer, if you have a processor, I would rather them deal with, those 20%, 10% issue things where they need to make a decision and think that's important, or interacting with the customer. Because when we look at AI and things that can get automated, an interaction with a human being can't completely, right? There's bots and there's ways of doing it, but you're just not going to get.
No, I completely agree with you, actually. I think that that's why I said when I started the conversation, I was like, listen, it works sometimes, but human beings are irrational. So, so I can sit here and say, and put my best foot forward, but, sometimes it falls on somebody that's not willing to hear it at the time, or somebody that feels like their process is better. And there's nothing I could do to change that. Those are factors those are emotional factors. So I don't have a candle to hold.
No, and that's going to be part of this too. We're talking about automation, but there's a lot of emotion.
It's a very emotional.
It
is a very.
And then I think people have that reaction to. You had mentioned, I think in a recent LinkedIn post, that bots should feel like part of your team, right?
Yeah.
So let's kind of end with unpacking that, right? Like, so how do you automate some parts of that human interaction? Like someone's interacting with a bot, right? Like, what is that actually going to look like? How does that look? Well, is that going to be the entire part of the mortgage process someday?
Honestly, I think one day the process is going to be completely automated. I think there's going to be gatekeepers, and that's where I think human beings are going to be repurposed for. And I think what's going to happen is that people will be more, there'll be less mistakes, there'll be more accurate results, there'll be less cures on your loans because people are actually spending time on the things that matter, that make you money or lose you money,
right?
Instead of making sure your parcel ID is in your subject property,
right.
So
or entering the mortgage 70 times
exactly. So just examples of that, like, if a person instead is making sure that, it's not a, high price loan, if it's not, if it's certain criteria is being met, if all the guidelines are being met by the investor, those are the important conversations that need to happen,
right.
And I think those are the things that need to be repurposed for human beings. But human beings, I see them as gatekeepers, and I see them as more as the things that fall off the wayside that can cause big companies to falter. Like and so we've seen it time and again. I think a lot of big companies, just it takes like 15 bad loans, and you're SOL. Like so.
In some cases, a few bad headlines too. When I think of a technology focused mortgage company that was doing a lot of things themselves, better.com, right?
Yeah. That's a
what happened to that?
Right? I don't even know. It's like better.com. People like better.com. I was like, yeah, at one time that was a thing.
Yeah. It was huge. Yeah. Absolutely. I remember going to their office trying to pitch them at one point. So yeah, that was I think it'll be interesting to see because I think you and I feel like this change is inevitable. But not everyone does. I was talking to my dad, who's just about 70 years old. He has run his title company since 94. And he was even saying and looking at it, he's like, he feels like he called it the paper generation, right? Like I am a pen, like that is how I started in this business. So now there's like people, he said, if he was 20, 25 years younger, he said he wouldn't be the right person for his organization because he's from a paper world in a digital environment right now, right? And the people that are leading that organization now and leading more and more organizations are kind of those digital natives like us, like people who grew up and are kind of understanding that. And I think in banking, because it's an older industry, you're slowly but surely seeing that change, right? I think there's
slowly.
A lot, and it's not all age related. There can be people who are older and are tech savvy and understand that, and there's people who aren't.
No, but I completely agree with you, man. I think that's the conversation that's like, the problem is that I would say that people didn't think that we'd be on computers, doing everything on computers, and we are. It just takes time, but there is resistance. There will always be resistance because as human beings, we're irrational. So even though something makes
figuring out what that next thing is, right? Like what's the next version of the computer that revolutionize what we do. So
well, hopefully it's one of us, man. So you can take me.
I'm gonna say if we can figure it out, we won't be doing this. So
for sure.
The last question that we always like to ask, is we're just about at time now, is Lodestar is a guiding star. It's something that helps people navigate. So the question we like to ask everyone is, what is your personal Lodestar? What is your kind of guiding star that gets you up, excited about running a business, doing this, dealing in this crazy cyclical industry where there's going to be ups and downs? Like what keeps you moving?
I think what it is that, I think a lot of it is, I think as an entrepreneur, you have to have that ability not to give up. And giving up is tantamount to like quitting. I don't know. It's like survival. I don't know. I think like, I know, Jim, like, quitting is not an option, because we have people that depend on us. We have family that depends on us. We spend so much time and effort on something, and it's almost like our next kid. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I have a little girl, but this is probably a little boy.
I mean, I feel that way. Lodestar's 10 years old now, right? And like my daughter's only a year and a half, so I definitely have been having the shift. slowly but surely.
Yeah.
But it's, you have to take care of both of them in different ways. So I was I really like that. And I had was talking to a friend of mine who his wife is starting a business and it's going really, really well. And I told them it's going to work for one reason, because it has to, right?
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, like the businesses that are successful, ultimately you get yourself in that position, or you put yourself in position where like the only way out is through. We have to make this work, right? And that was, how I felt when we were really going through our downtimes in Lodestar, and what got us through of like, no, quitting's not an option. Like, we absolutely have to figure this out.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I feel too. Mm-hmm. I think survival necessitates success sometimes.
And innovation and creativity.
And innovation, like you have to do something. Like right now is not a great time to be in a service industry in mortgage, but you find a way.
Right, and these are also times where a lot of companies get founded or innovated.
Yeah, exactly. The biggest companies get founded right now, the most successful ones, because they know that competition is getting slim, and as soon as stuff turns around, that's when you start making that pretty penny. But you got to start before you eat. So
I like it. Yeah. Well, this is a motivating way to end the conversation. So, Babar, I appreciate your time, and thanks for coming on the podcast. Thank you for listening to Lodestar's Lending Leaders. Please like, subscribe, and rate us 5 stars anywhere you get your podcast. I'd like to give a special thank you to the Lodestar team involved with the production of this podcast, including Elena Gardner, Tim Austin, and John Gardner.